of service to the wider community is what some of our spiritually grounded private institutions in this state have been doing and are doing as an asset to the wider community. Some of our spiritually grounded higher education institutions have an opportunity to become a more widely affirmed regional asset. That is clearly what Regis has been working on. In its way, the University of Denver has been working on. I told the chancellor, a good friend, that if he hadn't already protected the assertion that's on their website, private university for the public good, I would take it, because it's exactly what we're about. All of our institutions are to be about serving the public good. And of course, part of the challenge is how to determine what counts. That's where the rub often lies. I want to give you an illustration that we have historic precedent, because part of what I agreed to do in our committee work trying to figure out how to talk about education this month is to give at least a snippet into history. I am going to take personal and institutional privilege by sharing with you a tiny bit of history of a person who shaped this region, but also shaped the institution I'm privileged to serve as president. That person is John Wesley Iliff. You probably figured from the middle name he was Methodist. He was a fairly privileged young man who grew up on what my home state, Louisiana, would have called a plantation, but it was a large farm in Ohio. He attended Ohio Wesleyan College, not university, and rather than take on management and ownership of the family enterprise, he was adventurous. This is an important characteristic because this actually characterizes a number of our private, spiritually grounded higher education institutions in this region. And he decided that he would simply strike out and explore and see what life brought. On the way to Kansas, which is the direction he went, he realized he needed to make a living. He was, maybe in some respects, slow. He stopped. I'm not sure if this is when resources gave out, but he stopped and he set up an enterprise he knew nothing about. Adventurous, now entrepreneurial. Important additional characteristic. That was dry goods. It prospered. Then he heard that minerals had been discovered further west in the mountains. And he picked up and moved further west. And I promise you, the same spirit that whispered in the ears of Levi Strauss 10 years earlier in California, we're speaking to him. The wisdom that came was, do not be a miner. Do not be a miner. Be a provisioner to miners. And so he set up his enterprise at the intersection of the South Platte and Cherry Creek. And it prospered for a while. The more people that came across the prairie, however, the fewer financial resources they had because the price of getting goods on the way westward went higher, the fewer there were available. So by the time most people began getting here, all they had was no money, but they had things. So third, he went into barter. That was a huge business gamble. What did he get for his wares? He got livestock. Now, an acquaintance of mine back in Arkansas, a man named John Tyson, says that he's in the protein business. I've never heard poultry and pork enterprise called the protein business until he told me. But you know, in the 19th century, John Wesley Iliff understood he was in the protein business now, because as he let the nearly dead livestock loose on the floodplain of the river, they got fat. They had to figure out, what do I do with them? And he thought, meat. I have said to some of my trustees and others that he became a cowboy. Family members, descendants of his, have asked me, please refer to him as a cattleman. I got a lesson in class consciousness there. So he was, it's not as romantic, but he was a cattleman who succeeded. And some people say that one of his ranches is what today is known as Wyoming. He was very successful. One of the ways, though, that he made success was to realize, quite shrewdly, that he could get more money for cattle if they weighed more than if they weighed less. And his breakout contract was to provide protein to the Union Pacific Transcontinental Rail Line going through Cheyenne. So he and a number of other business colleagues here built that rail spur between here and Cheyenne that changed forever the region, politically, socially, economically. Mr. Iliff was part of that. Well, this man, through all the adventures and the entrepreneurial spirit, and there were others like it who helped with Regis and who helped, actually he was one of those who helped with what was Colorado Seminary, but also Colorado College, other places that are spiritually grounded. By virtue of what he learned, he wanted there to be a school here that would equip people to be leaders, initially those who would be credentialed, spiritual, pastoral leaders serving the vast, growing population of those who were spiritually hungry out here. But he also wanted there to be the same institution that would serve people like himself, people who were business and professional people for whom issues of integrity, principle, purpose, and spiritual grounding matter. And so this is what, in fact, came into being. He wanted there to be a place where leaders could be equipped to assist all who live here to navigate the turbulence of living on the frontier. For him, the frontier meant a certain thing. For us, the frontier is broadened plural. We face economic, biogenetic, global, terrorist, militaristic, and other, educational is one, frontiers. And this is what the cluster of institutions of education in this state who have had some kind of spiritual grounding all can bring, not only as their story, but as their prospect. Let me talk a little bit about two of the institutions, so you don't just get a thought that I'm pushing Iliff only, though I know that one best. I want to talk about Regis and Iliff. I came to know Regis first through a long-time personal mentor of mine, a man now dead named Peter Drucker. I was in the process of helping Mr. Drucker start the programmatic work of the foundation he was setting up toward the end of his life, looking at nonprofit management and leadership. And through that enterprise, I met David Clark. Some of you may know David Clark. David Clark, at the time I met him, recently retired or resigned as being president of Regis University. It was Father Clark who largely transformed Regis from being a good and substantial, but not widely viewed as outstanding school, to one that boldly reached out to serve new publics. So I made it my business to know him, never having a clue that one day I would be coming to Denver with a similar mandate to help transform an extremely good and historic institution so that it can serve very well a much wider set of publics than it is historically focused upon. What Father Clark and I have both seen is that by confining ourselves, we use business language, and Iliff that sometimes rankles some of our educators, but education is a business, for good or ill, and it is a not-for-loss business, even though we don't call it a not-for-profit business. By confining ourselves to traditional market niches, we are undercapitalizing our institutional assets, as Regis has moved to a much more complex and significant scale of operation using technologies, among other things. So Iliff has begun moving in that trajectory, and I'm grateful to Jim Wilkins, member of my board, for commenting on how we're now being looked at throughout North America as being leaders and game changers in using hybrid and online education to equip communities to be effective navigating turbulence in the world. But here's the challenge that faces any of us, not just those of us in education, whether spiritually grounded or not, but every one of you who is employed or who has been is faced with this challenge more than once. Are we going to settle for doing as best we can, even if it is done very well, what we already know we can deliver, and how we know we can deliver it, and the price points for which we know we can deliver it? Or do we face head-on the need